Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The wind keened like a living thing that night, howling over the white wastes beyond the wall. It carried with it the scent of frost and blood, the scent of the true north. Beneath the half-shrouded moon, 5 riders pressed on through the endless snow, their cloaks heavy with rime, their torches guttering in the biting cold. At their head rode Harl Snowbane, broad-shouldered and solemn, his beard crusted with ice, his eyes gray as frozen steel. Once he had been a ranger of the Night's Watch, a brother sworn to stand his post till death. Now he rode not for honor, but for truth, for word had reached Castle Black of strange lights beyond the frost fangs, and whispers of the dead walking again. The Night King had fallen years ago, slain by the Dragon Queen's last living flame, and the courage of heroes long perished. Yet the wildlings who still dwelled in the far north spoke of a new master, a figure cloaked in shadow, who raised the dead not for conquest, but for silence, a master who did not seek to destroy, but to endure. And so, Lord Commander Ed Tollett had summoned Harl, the last ranger who remembered Benjen Stark's final ranging, and bade him find what truth lay buried in the snow. Now, 3 days beyond the wall, Harl was beginning to fear that truth had teeth. The cold had grown unnatural, the kind that burned through mail and leather, numbing even the will to move. The sky was a pale, endless gray, and the sun had not risen properly for days. His companions muttered that the long night was returning, but Harl refused to listen. Fear was the first death beyond the wall, and he had no wish to die twice. Behind him trudged his company, 5 in all, though only 3 still had strength enough to speak. There was Bran of Hardhome, a wildling scout with sharp eyes and a quicker knife. Kedden, the sullen Eastwatch tracker, whose silence spoke of old grief. Sir Vion Marsh, a bastard knight from the Reach seeking redemption. And Tala, a young woman sworn to the Watch after losing her kin to raiders, fierce, bright, and reckless, her laughter the only warmth left among them. They had found no villages, no fires, no living soul, only the bones of camps long abandoned and tracks half swallowed by drifting snow. And once, on the second night, they'd found something else, a dead elk, frozen solid, its eyes wide with terror, its flesh unmarked. The air killed it, Bran had muttered then, crossing himself. But now, on the 5th night, as they made camp beneath the jagged rise of a frost-covered ridge, Tala pointed toward the dark horizon. "There," she whispered. Through the swirl of snow, a faint glow pulsed like a heartbeat, far off, deep within the mountains. It was not firelight. It was colder, blue-white, and steady as moonlight upon glass. "The fortress," Harl murmured. "It must be." He could feel it, something old stirring beneath the wind, like the land itself was listening. That night, no one slept. When dawn came, or what passed for dawn beneath that veiled sky, they set out toward the light. The snow deepened as they climbed, swallowing their boots, dragging at their cloaks. The mountain loomed above them like a frozen giant, its flanks carved with cracks that breathed faint plumes of icy mist. As they neared the ridge, the light grew brighter, and they saw it, a tower half buried in the glacier, its stones black with age, its windows shuttered with sheets of ice. Around it, stood what might once have been walls, now little more than jagged ruins half swallowed by snow, a forgotten holdfast, or a tomb. Kedden drew his sword. No keep this far north should stand. This place should be gone to ghosts. Maybe it is, said Tala softly. But Harl said nothing. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon him, a gaze colder than the storm, sharp as the edge of night itself. They entered through the broken gate, torches sputtering. Inside lay long corridors of ice and stone, lined with what looked like frozen corpses, men and women in the garb of meisters and rangers alike, preserved as if time itself had halted. "Seven save us," whispered Servion. "What kind of place is this?" Then came the sound, a faint scraping, slow and deliberate. Harl turned, blade drawn, as a shadow detached itself from the far wall. It moved like smoke, its outline human, its eyes pale as moonlight on snow. "You should not have come," said the shadow, its voice hollow, yet unmistakably alive. And from beneath its hood, Harl glimpsed a chain of metal links gleaming faintly, the chain of a Meister. "I am Othris," the figure said, "Maester of Old Town, exile of the Citadel, master of this place, and of all that lies beyond it." The wind outside howled like a beast denied, and Harl felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. The dead, he realized, were not walking to war. They were walking to serve, and their master had been waiting for them. The hall was vast and hollow, its vaulted ceiling lost in a haze of drifting frost. The faint blue glow they had seen from afar now shimmered from the ice itself, pulsing through the walls like veins of some buried, frozen beast. Harl's breath fogged before him as he stared at the man who called himself Othris. The maester's face was pale as snowmelt, thin and lined with sleepless years. Frost clung to the stubble along his jaw, and his eyes, though weary, burned with a terrible clarity. Around his neck hung a chain of many metals, though some of the links were darkened and cracked, as though they had been burned by fire or blighted by cold. "You're a long way from Old Town," Harl said, his voice rough as gravel. "And further still from the Citadel." The Meister smiled faintly. I was sent beyond the wall long ago, when dragons still flew and kings still thought they ruled the world. The Archmeisters bade me study what lay in the north, the true heart of death. And here I found it. He spread his hands, and the air grew colder still. Frost began to creep along the stone, and the still figures in the hall seemed to shift, almost imperceptibly. Bran stepped forward, knife half drawn. "You've got whites in here. Why aren't they tearing us apart?" "They cannot," said Othris softly. "They serve the binding. My will keeps them still. The Night King ruled by hate and shadow. I rule by knowledge." Harl felt the others stir uneasily behind him. Tala's hand tightened on her spear. "You say rule, Maester," she said. "But no man rules the dead. They have no masters." "Every man dies, girl," Othris murmured. "And death always has a master." A silence fell, heavy and cold. Then, with a motion almost gentle, Othris gestured for them to follow. "Come," he said. "You've traveled far, and you must see the truth with your own eyes. Then perhaps you'll understand why I called you here." "Called us?" Harl said. "We came because of rumor and fear." Othris turned, the faintest smile on his lips. "No, you came because I sent them." The torches flickered, and from the shadows at the far end of the hall, 3 shapes stepped forth, rangers of the Watch, or what had once been rangers. Their faces were gray and thin, their eyes pale blue and burning faintly like coals in snow. Kedden swore and raised his sword, but Harl stopped him. He recognized one of the faces, Lorne Marsh, a man lost on the Frostfangs 2 winters past. Othris spoke again, his voice calm. "They are bound, not to me, but to the wall itself. I found them long before the frost claimed their minds. They came seeking the same truth as you, the truth of the long night." "The long night is ended," said Servion. "The Night King is dead." Othris's eyes narrowed. "You think it ended. Yet the cold deepens, the sun hides, the seasons falter. Did you never wonder why?" He turned, walking deeper into the hall. The dead followed him in silent file, their steps echoing faintly. Reluctantly, Harl and his company followed. They passed beneath a cracked archway into a lower chamber, where great slabs of ice jutted from the ground like tombstones. Within each one glimmered a shape, men, women, children, even beasts, all preserved in a stillness that was neither life nor death. "Your doing?" Harl asked quietly. Othris nodded. "In part. The wall was built not only of stone and spellcraft, but of memory. The blood of the first men and the children still lingers in its wards. I have learned to listen to it. These," he gestured to the frozen figures, "are my protection. They hold the old wards in place. If they wake, the wall falls." Tala stepped closer, her torchlight gleaming off the ice. "You keep the long night at bay by keeping these souls trapped?" Othris's eyes met hers, cold and unwavering. "Better they sleep in peace than rise in horror. Would you rather the dead march again?" The torchlight flickered. Somewhere above, the wind screamed across the stones like a lament. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Bran said, "If you're truly holding the wall together, why send for us?" Othris's voice lowered. "Because the spell is failing. The wall weakens, the binding frays. The dead stir without command. I have held them as long as I can, but the fire within me dies." He pressed a trembling hand to his chest. "My heart beats only because of the blood I took from the whites. It is not life. It is a tether." He turned to Harl then, his gaze sharp as shattered ice. "The wall will fall unless I pass the binding to another." Silence fell like snowfall. "You mean to make one of us like you?" Harl said. "I mean to make one of you a warden of death," Othris replied, "to hold back the night once I am gone. It must be done willingly. Otherwise the dead will no longer listen." Kedden spat into the frost. "You damn us to become monsters." "I would save you," said Othris sharply. "Save your children, your wall, your world. The choice is yours." He turned, walking back toward the icy dais at the center of the hall. With emotion, he drew forth a shard of crystal, glowing faintly blue, its surface alive with threads of moving light. "This is the heart of the binding," he said. "It must be joined with living blood to endure. One of you must take it before I fade." But Harl saw something in Othris's eyes then. Not hope, but fear. And in that moment, a sound came from behind them. The shatter of ice, the rush of air like a great sigh. The frozen figures in the walls were moving. Tala's torch went out in the sudden cold, plunging them into a storm of darkness and flickering blue light. "Meister!" Harl shouted. "You said they were bound." "They were." Othris's voice rose above the chaos. "Something breaks the seal, something alive." The ground trembled. From the far end of the hall came a roar, deep, guttural, ancient. Bran drew his knife, pale-faced. "That's no white. That's—" But the words died as the ice split open, and through it clawed the shape of something vast and terrible, a beast of frost and bone, its eyes burning cold fire. And as it rose, the maester's chain began to glow, link by link, as if answering the creature's hunger. "The wall remembers," whispered Othrys, "and it does not forgive." The beast's roar shook the ice from the rafters. The air itself seemed to freeze solid, and the torches died as if snuffed by an unseen hand. The pale blue light from Othrys's chain flared brighter, illuminating the monstrous form that clawed its way into the hall. It was vast, a dire wolf, or what had once been one, but far larger than any that had walked the north in living memory. Its pelt was a shroud of hoarfrost, its bones glinting through in places like spears of glass. When it moved, the sound was of ice grinding against ice, and when it looked upon them, its gaze burned like frozen lightning. The dead Meister stumbled back, clutching his chain. "The guardian of the wards," he cried. "It sleeps within the ice, bound to the wall itself. I did not call it." The creature lunged. Harl barely had time to draw his sword before the thing's claws struck. The blow threw him across the floor, the impact jarring through his ribs. The hall exploded into chaos. Bran darted behind a pillar. Tala shouted a curse and flung her spear. It struck the beast's shoulder, splintering uselessly. Kedden dragged Serveon behind a fallen slab, the knight's armor scraping like stones. "Fire!" Harl roared, struggling to his feet. "It fears fire." Tala snatched a torch from the ground, but its flame was weak and sputtering. She hurled it anyway. It struck the beast's chest, scattering sparks across its icy fur. The creature hissed, a terrible sound, like steam rising from frozen water. But it did not falter. Othrys raised his hands. His chain glowed brighter, and the runes carved into the icy walls flared in answer. For an instant, the beast froze mid-stride, its limbs locked. "Now!" Othrys shouted. Harl charged, sword raised high. He brought the blade down with all his strength, cleaving into the creature's side. The steel met flesh, or something that felt like it, and cracked. The beast's blood was not red, but white, like molten snow. It let out another bone-shaking roar, and the ice beneath their feet splintered. The ground gave way. The hall collapsed into darkness. When Harl came to, his head throbbed and his body ached. He was half buried in snow and ice, the air thick with dust and frost. He pushed himself free and looked around. The chamber above had fallen in. They now lay in what seemed an ancient tunnel, its walls carved with runes so old the stone itself had begun to swallow them. Bran was beside him, blood on his temple, but breathing. Tala crawled from beneath a broken pillar, her arm limp but her eyes fierce. Kedden and Serveon were nowhere to be seen. And Othrys. The Meister stood amid the ruin, his glow dimmer now. His chain hung loose about his neck, one of its links broken and blackened. In his hand, he still held the shard of crystal, flickering faintly like a dying star. "The seal is gone," he whispered. "The wall weakens." Harl staggered to his feet. "Then we must get out, find another way to the surface before this whole mountain buries us." Othrys looked up, his expression distant. "There is another path, but it leads not upward, it leads beneath. The wall's roots reach deep, deeper than men ever knew. The old ones carved roads there when the world was young. And you know the way?" "I do. But if we go, there is no turning back." Harl glanced at his companions, exhausted, bloodied, half-frozen. He saw the fear in their eyes, but also the fire. "Lead us," he said at last. The Maester nodded once, then turned toward the dark tunnel ahead. They followed, their footsteps crunching softly in the frost. The air was still, heavy with old power. Strange lights shimmered faintly in the walls. Ghostly reflections, perhaps, or souls caught between sleep and waking. After a time that might have been hours or days, they came to a wide cavern, domed and hollow. At its center stood a circle of black stone columns, each carved with faces, human, elven, monstrous, all staring inward toward a pit of bottomless shadow. Othris approached the edge and held up his crystal. "This is where it began," he said softly. "The wall was born from here, from the binding of fire and ice. The children of the forest wove their magic into the roots of the earth, and the first men sealed it with their blood. But blood fades, and the magic weakens." He turned to Harl. "The bond must be renewed." "By who?" Tala demanded. "By one who still carries the blood of the North," Othris said, eyes gleaming. "A son of Stark." Harl stiffened. "I am no Stark. My father was a ranger, a bastard of Winterfell at best." The maester's lips curved into a sad smile. "Bastard or not, the blood runs true. You feel it, do you not? The pull of the wall, the whisper of the cold. It calls to its kin." Harl said nothing. Deep down, he had always felt it, that strange, restless yearning whenever he looked northward. The sense that the wall was not a barrier but a gate. Othris stepped closer, holding out the crystal. "Take it. Bind yourself to the wall, and it will stand another age. And if I refuse, then the dead will wake again, and this time there will be no dragon queen to stop them." The cavern seemed to darken around them. The faces carved into the pillars appeared to shift, mouths opening in silent screams. Tala gripped Harl's arm. "Don't trust him. Whatever he's bound to, it's no good thing." Othris's eyes flashed. "You think I chose this? I was a Meister once, sworn to knowledge. But knowledge is never free. I gave my life to hold back death, and death took it anyway. The wall demands a master. Without one, it dies." Bran moved suddenly, drawing his knife. "If it needs a master, maybe it should die." The maester turned to him, sorrow in his gaze. "Then so shall you." The crystal flared. A wave of cold light swept through the chamber. The air turned to glass, freezing mid-breath. Bran cried out, his blade shattering in his hand, frost spreading up his arm. "No!" Harl lunged forward, tackling Othris to the ground. The crystal slipped from the Meister's grasp and rolled across the stone floor, pulsing faster and faster, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. Tala snatched it up, shouting, "What do I do with it?" Othris's voice, hoarse and desperate, filled the chamber. Don't destroy it. It's the only thing holding the wall." Harl stared down at him, his sword poised. "And what happens if it breaks?" "Then winter wins." The ground trembled again, the faces on the pillars beginning to weep frost. Above, in the cracks of the cavern ceiling, faint light flickered, the first hint of dawn, or the fire of something greater. Harl met Tala's eyes. He did not need to speak. With a single motion, she hurled the crystal into the pit. The light burst, blinding, terrible, pure, and in that instant, the wall shuddered from crown to root. Far to the south, the ravens screamed. The blast of light tore through the cavern like the birth of a new sun. The cold itself screamed, a sound that was not of wind or stone, but of something ancient and boundless being ripped apart. Harl fell to his knees as the ground heaved beneath him, a wave of heat and frost colliding in the air. The pit blazed white, brighter than dragonfire, then collapsed into darkness. When the echoes faded, all that remained was the slow, hollow drip of melting ice. For a long while, no one spoke. Harl rose shakily, gripping his sword for balance. The air was warmer now, subtly, but unmistakably. The frost that had clung to the walls was melting, trickling in thin silver lines. Tala stood at the edge of the pit, her face pale, the light of the fallen crystal still dancing behind her eyes. "It's gone," she whispered. "The heart is gone." Othras lay a few feet away, his body broken, the links of his chain scattered across the floor. Harl knelt beside him. The Meister's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, and when he spoke, his voice was no louder than the whisper of snow. "You do not know what you have done," he murmured. The wall was not only stone, it was memory, a wound that never healed. And now, he coughed, crimson staining the ice beneath his lips. Now the wound bleeds. Harl gripped his shoulder. "We had no choice. The thing you built was dying." Othras's eyes flickered open, dull gray, no longer glowing. "Then pray that it does not take the world with it." With a sigh, he went still. For a moment, Harl felt an unfamiliar weight settle upon him. Not grief, but something colder. The sense that the Maester's words were not a warning, but a prophecy. A low rumble stirred through the cavern. The runes on the pillars began to fade, one by one, like dying embers. Bran limped closer, his arm wrapped in rags of frostbitten flesh. "The ice is cracking," he said hoarsely. "We need to go. Now." They fled through the tunnel the way they had come, though now the path was changed. The ice groaned and shifted beneath their feet, the air thick with mist and the taste of iron. It was as if the mountain itself had begun to thaw. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes. Time had no meaning in that pale labyrinth. When at last they saw a dim light ahead, it was not the blue glow of the Master's magic, but the first gray shimmer of day. They emerged into a valley of white and ash. The ruins of the fortress above had collapsed entirely. Jagged stones jutted from the snow like broken teeth. Smoke rose in thin columns, and where it touched the air, the snow hissed and melted. Harl stared, breath caught in his chest. "It's warm," he said softly. "Truly warm." Bran bent to touch the slush. "The wall's magic is dying. The cold was never meant to leave us." Tala wiped her brow, eyes searching the horizon. "So what now? Do we go back to the Watch and tell them we ended the world?" Harl didn't answer. He turned north instead, to where the horizon shimmered faintly, not with snow, but with mist. A distant sound carried on the wind, the faint rush of water, flowing water. "It's melting," he said. "The frost fangs, the whole range." A shadow passed overhead, vast, winged, and silent. For an instant, the three froze, half in awe, half in terror. But when Harl looked up, the sky was empty once more. "Did you see?" Tala began. "Yes," said Harl. "But I don't think it was alive." They made camp that night at the edge of the valley, where the stone still held some warmth from the broken fire below. None of them slept. The air was thick with the sound of dripping water and the faint, distant groan of shifting ice. At dawn, Bran woke first. He was staring northward, toward the growing mist. "Something's moving," he said. From the fog came shapes. At first, small, uncertain, then more. Dozens, scores, figures of men and women, some in furs, others in rags. Wildlings, perhaps, or what was left of them. Their skin was pale, their eyes hollow, yet they walked not with the stiffness of the dead, but the weary gait of the living. One of them, a woman with tangled hair streaked white, approached Harl. "The ice broke," she said simply. "The dead do not move. The wind is quiet." but the rivers run again. Where did you come from? The far north, she said, where the ground never thawed, even in summer. It is thawing now. Tala looked at Harl, unease shadowing her face. If the wall melts, there's nothing to stop whatever lies beyond. Harl thought of Othrys's final words. The wound bleeds. They spent the day helping the wanderers gather food and light fires. The warmth was strange, almost heavy. It made their skin damp, their breath shallow. At sunset, the sky glowed faintly red, as if painted with blood. That night, as Harl kept watch, he saw something move among the melting drifts, a glimmer of white that was not snow. He rose and followed, sword in hand. The figure stopped at the edge of the clearing. It was Othrys, or rather, the shadow of him, thin, translucent, his chain gone, his eyes dim as fading stars. You broke the bond, the ghost said. The wall falls, the dead sleep, but the sea wakes. The sea? Harl asked, frowning. Othrys raised a trembling hand, pointing north. The ice kept more than whites at bay. Beneath it lies the old sea, the black water that sleeps beneath the world. If it wakes, all things drown. The wind shifted, carrying with it a sound like distant thunder, though it came from beneath the earth. When Harl looked again, Othrys was gone. By morning, the rivers had swollen, carving deep channels through the snow. The wanderers gathered their things and spoke of heading south, to the wall, to find safety. But when they reached the foothills, safety was nowhere to be found. The wall, once a shining monument of ice and stone, was cracked from crown to root. Water gushed through its lower reaches, steaming in the cold. The watchmen stood in stunned silence, their torches guttering. Ed Tollett himself stood among them, his cloak heavy with frost. When he saw Harl, he did not smile. 7 save us, the Lord Commander muttered. The wall is dying. What in the name of the gods did you do? Harl looked at the great wound running through the ice, wide enough for 100 men to walk abreast. The truth, he said quietly. We set it free. And beyond that wound, far in the north, the mist was rising higher, spreading across the land like a slow, dark tide. The long night had ended, but something older and far more patient had begun to wake. The breaking of the wall was not an instant, but a slow unraveling. It groaned like a wounded beast as its ancient wards failed one by one. Great sheets of ice sloughed away, thundering down into the snow. The magic that had bound it for 8,000 years was undone, and the cold that had once protected the realms of men began to seep away, replaced by something stranger. Harl stood before it in silence, watching the steam rise from the cracks. The once blue surface of the wall now glowed faintly red, as if fire burned deep within its heart. It looked alive, angry even. Ed Tollett approached, grim-faced beneath his hood of black fur. Tell me everything, he said, his voice rough from the cold and from fear. So Harl told him. He spoke of the fortress of ice, the dead Meister, the crystal heart, the thing beneath the mountain. He spoke of the thaw, the ghosts, the river that ran from the north. When he finished, the wind had gone still. Ed's eyes lingered on the horizon. You mean to say the wall was kept by a man's life? A single chain holding back the grave itself? Aye, said Harl. And that chain is broken now. 7 hells, Ed whispered. We are undone. Behind them, the watchmen murmured among themselves. Some crossed themselves, others stared in disbelief. The wildlings who had come south fell to their knees, as though praying to gods older than memory. Bran came forward, face pale, the frost-bitten scars on his arm shining like runes. "There's something else," he said quietly. "The north wind. It's changed. Listen." They did, and what they heard was not the sharp cry of winter air, but a low, distant rumble. It came from far beyond the shattered wall, deep, rolling, endless. "The sea," said Harl. "Othris warned me of it. The black water that sleeps beneath the world." Ed frowned. "The shivering sea lies far to the east. There's nothing north but ice." "Not anymore." They rode out the next morning, though many of the watch tried to dissuade them. "The wall is our charge," Ed said. "If it falls, we fall with it." But Harl knew the truth. The wall had already fallen. He led a small party beyond the breach, Tala at his side, Bran limping behind, and 5 others who had volunteered to follow. The wildling woman who had first found them came too, her name now given, Veyra Snowchild, last of the Ice River clans. She walked lightly upon the melting drifts, her eyes fixed northward. For days they traveled through a land no longer dead but dying. The snow melted into mud, and rivers ran black with silt. The air stank of rot and brine. Strange birds circled above, pale, sleek things with eyes like shards of glass. On the 3rd night, they camped beside a frozen lake that was no longer frozen. The ice cracked beneath their boots, and water rose in thin, whispering streams. Bran crouched near the edge, peering into the dark beneath. "There's movement," he said. "Something stirring below." Tala joined him. "Fish?" He shook his head. "Too big." They watched as the surface rippled. For an instant, Harl thought he saw something, a pale, sinuous shape, like a serpent's spine, gliding beneath the water. Then it was gone. That night, the lake began to steam. They awoke to the smell of salt and sulfur. The snow around the camp had melted completely, revealing patches of bare black stone. And in the east, the horizon burned faintly with dawn, or perhaps fire. They followed the steam northward until the ground itself grew warm beneath their boots. The hills here were cracked and hollow, as if something had clawed its way up from below. By evening, they found the source. The land opened before them in a great, smoking chasm. Within it lay an ocean, not of blue water, but of shifting black. The surface gleamed like oil, reflecting the red of the sky. The air shimmered with heat and salt. "The black water," Veyra whispered, awe and terror mingled in her voice. "The drowned sea of the first age. It was said the gods buried it when the world was made." "Then the world is unmaking itself," Tala murmured. Harl stared into the dark waters. He could feel them calling, a deep thrum in his bones, like the beating of a giant heart, the same pulse he had felt in Othris's crystal, the same hum that had echoed through the wall before it fell. Bran picked up a stone and threw it into the sea. It sank without a sound. "There's no bottom," he said softly. "No," Harl replied. "There wouldn't be." A sudden gust of wind swept across the chasm, carrying with it a voice, a whisper, distant but unmistakable. It was not words at first, only sound. Then it grew clearer, rising like a tide. "Return it." Tala clutched her cloak. "What was that?" "Something that knows what we took," Harl said. The ground trembled. The waters churned. From the depths rose a faint glow, the same blue-white light they had seen in the fortress of ice. The crystal. It floated upward, gleaming, untouched by the sea's corruption. For an instant, Harl thought he saw Othris's face reflected in its glow, calm and sorrowful. Then the light spread, rippling outward across the sea like veins of fire. The wind screamed. Veyra fell to her knees, hands pressed to her ears. "It's calling to the dead," she gasped. "The ones who sleep beneath the ice." The sea boiled. From its surface burst shapes, skeletal, pale, their flesh long since devoured by time. Thousands of them, rising from the black like drowned corpses breaking through a frozen river. Tala drew her sword, though she knew it was useless. "7 save us," she breathed. "They're everywhere." The dead did not advance, but neither did they fall. They stood motionless, eyes empty, heads tilted toward the light. The crystal's glow intensified until it was almost blinding. Then Harl heard the voice again, clear now, deep as thunder. One must bind, one must serve. He understood then. The maester's warning had not been a curse, but a covenant. The wall's magic had not been destroyed, only released. The binding required a vessel. Without it, the dead would have no master. Tala turned to him, her eyes wide with dread. "Don't you dare, Harl. Don't you even think of it." But he already knew what he must do. He stepped forward, toward the chasm's edge. The heat burned his skin, the salt stung his eyes, but still he walked. The crystal rose higher, waiting for him like a star descending to earth. When he reached the brink, he looked back once, to Tala, to Bran, to the ragged remnants of his company. "Keep the wall," he said simply, "whatever it becomes." Then he leapt. The light swallowed him whole. The sea roared, rising into a storm of black waves and fire. The dead bowed their heads, and for a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the sea calmed. The light dimmed. The dead sank once more into the depths. When the steam cleared, the chasm was empty. Only the faint shimmer of frost remained where Harl had stood. Far to the south, the wall ceased its cracking. The water froze. The air stilled. Tala knelt, her hand pressed to the ground. It was cold again, but not dead. A new frost, alive and sharp. "Harl Snowbane," she whispered, "the master beyond the wall." And above them, through the veil of mist, a single raven flew, its wings trailing frost, its eyes glowing faint blue. The morning after the sea fell silent was eerily still. Not a bird stirred, not a whisper of wind crossed the plains. Even the air seemed to have been hushed, as if the world itself held its breath. The frost that had spread across the land was unlike any that came before it. Not the lifeless chill of winter's grip, but something colder, cleaner, sharper. It glowed faintly, as though light moved within the ice. Tala awoke beside the remnants of their campfire, her limbs stiff and her eyes red from weeping. The night before had been a blur of storm and terror, of waves and the roar of the sea's awakening. She remembered the sight of Harl vanishing into the light, his voice lost in the thunder. The silence that followed had been almost worse than the sound. Bran sat nearby, staring north. He had not spoken since Harl's fall. His frost-bitten hand trembled in his lap, though not from cold. When Tala finally rose, he said without turning, "He's not dead." She closed her eyes. "Don't do that to yourself. He's gone, Bran. No man could survive that." Bran shook his head slowly. "He isn't a man anymore." Vera approached from the edge of the camp, her face pale beneath the rising light. "He's right," she said quietly. "The air hums again. The dead sleep. The wall freezes anew. Something, or someone, holds the bond." Tala looked between them. "You mean he's become what Othris was?" "No," Vera said, her eyes distant. "He's become what Othris feared to be. The wall does not bind him, he binds it." They set out southward before midday. The land was transformed. The rivers that had run black were frozen over once more, but their ice gleamed silver instead of blue. Trees, long dead and brittle, had begun to sprout new shoots from their frozen trunks. like winter learning to breathe again. Everywhere they went, they found signs of change. Dead men who had lain stiff for years were now gone, leaving only shallow hollows in the snow. The wind carried whispers, faint, half-formed voices that seemed to call from the north, not in despair, but in watchful calm. Tala could not decide whether to be afraid or comforted. When they reached the wall again, 3 days later, they found it whole once more. The breach had sealed itself, not with stone or mortar, but with living ice. It shimmered faintly in the light, the same hue as Harl's eyes had been. The watchmen who remained stood in stunned silence before the restored barrier. Lord Commander Ed Tollett came forward, disbelief etched into his face. "By all the gods," he murmured, "I thought it would crumble, but it's stronger than ever." Bran touched the ice. "He's inside it," he said softly. "Not dead, dreaming." Ed turned to them sharply. "Who?" "Harl Snowbane," Tala said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He gave himself to save the wall. He's the binding now." The Lord Commander looked from her to the wall, then back again. "If that's true," he said grimly, "then he's as much our warden as our prisoner." That night, the Brothers of the Watch built fires along the wall's base and offered prayers, some to the Seven, some to the old gods, and a few, hesitantly, to the man they now called the Master beyond the wall. Tala stayed apart from them, seated at the edge of the frost. The moon hung low and pale above the ice, its light trembling like a heartbeat. "Did you know," came Veyra's voice beside her, "that the old tale said the first wall was not built, but grown?" Tala frowned. "Grown? Aye. They say the children of the forest planted it, that it was alive once, like a tree that reached into the sky. But when men came and made war upon it, the wall hardened and turned to stone. It forgot what it was." Tala looked up at the towering surface before them. "And now?" Veyra's lips curved in something like a smile. "Now perhaps it remembers." That night, Tala dreamed. She stood upon a vast plain of snow beneath a black sky. The stars were gone. The wind moved around her in slow circles, whispering like the tide. Then, out of the darkness, came a figure cloaked in shadow and frost. "Harl?" she called. He stepped closer, his face pale and calm. His eyes glowed faintly, not blue, not white, but silver. "Tala," he said, his voice low, almost gentle. "You must keep them south. Do not let them come north again." "What is north?" she asked. "What lies there now?" "Not death," he said. "Not anymore, but something that waits. The sea is still. The dead are bound. But if the living disturb the quiet, it will rise again." She tried to reach for him, but the cold pushed her back. His form began to fade like mist before sunrise. "Harl, wait! What are you now?" He smiled, a small, sad thing. "The wall," he said simply, "and the wall is me." Then he was gone, and she woke with tears frozen to her face. Weeks passed. The word spread through the north, of the wall's restoration, of the strange frost that glowed at night, of the dead that no longer stirred in their barrows. The wildlings came south in greater numbers, seeking peace beneath the new wall's shadow. The Watch, fewer than ever, took them in, no longer guards against enemies, but stewards of a quiet that none could explain. And still, the stories grew. They said that when storms gathered in the far north, a figure could sometimes be seen walking along the wall's crest, tall, cloaked in shadow, his eyes like stars in snow. The ravens did not fly near him, yet their caws followed his path. The wildlings began to leave offerings at the wall's base, carved bone, bits of antler, and white stones shaped like hearts. They called him Snowbane, the warden of frost, keeper of the silent sea. Even some of the Black brothers began to whisper prayers before their patrols. But Tala did not pray. She climbed the wall. It took her the better part of a day, her hands bleeding from the climb, her breath frosting the air. When she reached the top, she found herself standing in utter stillness. The view stretched endless, the green south behind her, the white north before her. The frost here glimmered faintly beneath her boots. She knelt, pressing her hand to the ice. It was warm. "I hope you can hear me," she whispered. "We'll keep the wall, I promise." The wind rose then, gentle and soft, curling around her like a sigh. For an instant, she thought she heard his voice again, distant but content. Good. And when she looked northward, far beyond the horizon, she thought she saw movement, the faint shimmer of light upon a sea that should not exist. The world was quiet again, but not asleep. Something watched from the deep, patient, and eternal, and upon the wall of living frost, the soul of Harl Snowbane kept his vigil, the master beyond the wall, whose heart bound death and life in fragile, perfect balance. For now, the long night had ended, but the song of ice and fire was not yet done. Winter lingered in the north, though not as before. It was no longer the enemy that stalked the living, but a watchful guardian that neither slept nor faded. The snows still fell, soft and patient, yet beneath their white silence, life began to stir again. Frost-bitten pines pushed new needles from their blackened branches, and the long frozen rivers whispered beneath their glassy veils. Still, none dared forget what had been lost, or what had changed. The Night's Watch remained at the wall, though fewer now than ever. Some called them relics of an age gone by, men bound to oaths made for a war already fought. Others called them blessed, servants of the one who had become the wall itself, for it was said that Harl Snowbane watched from beyond. In the deep of night, when the fires burned low and the cold crept in, men swore they heard him, the faint echo of bootsteps along the wall's crest, the slow, measured rhythm of a ranger's patrol. And when storms rose from the north, the snow never touched Castle Black until dawn, as though an unseen hand brushed the drifts aside. The brothers told these tales in whispers, never sure whether to call them miracles or warnings. Tala remained among them. Though she had never sworn the vows, she was as much a part of the watch as any man in black. Her hair had grown long again, streaked with silver from frost and time. Her eyes, once bright as fire, now held the calm of endless winter. Each dawn she climbed the steps to the wall and stood before its gleaming surface. It pulsed faintly beneath the morning light, veins of blue and silver running through its frozen heart. Sometimes she thought she felt it breathe. "Still watching, Harl," she would murmur, pressing her gloved hand to the ice. "The world's quiet for now. You can rest." But the wall never answered, at least not in words. Beneath that quiet surface, the frost stirred faintly. The shape of a man could sometimes be seen in the depths, a flicker of motion, a shadow turned to light. A season passed. The thaw that had begun in the far north crept southward, slow but steady. The once white plains beyond the wall grew streaked with gray earth, and the first green shoots dared to rise between the stones. Bran was the first to see it. He had taken to ranging again, despite his wounded arm, driven by the same restlessness that had haunted Harl before him. One dawn, he returned to Castle Black with his cloak soaked in dew and his eyes wide as moons. "There's life beyond the wall," he said. "Not wights, not ghosts. Life." Ed Tollett gathered the watch to hear him. "You're sure of this?" I saw a village, Bran said. A dozen huts, maybe more. Smoke rising from fires. Children running. Wildlings or their kin, but alive and unafraid. The hall went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Tala rose slowly. Alive? No one's lived north of the wall since the Night King's fall. Bran nodded. Then perhaps the world has changed more than we thought. A council was held that night in the Lord Commander's chamber. Ed listened to Bran's tale in silence, his lined face unreadable. When the young ranger finished, Ed leaned back in his chair. If there's truth to this, he said, then the wall has become more than a prison. It's a gate. Maybe it always was. Tala frowned. We can't risk crossing again. You know what happened the last time someone meddled with what lies beyond. Ed's gaze met hers. And yet, if people are living there, if the land itself is healing, don't we owe it to them to see? She wanted to argue, but the memory of Harl's sacrifice weighed too heavy. The wall was quiet, yes, but quiet things could be fragile. Still, by dawn, the decision was made. Bran would lead a small party north. Tala insisted on going with him. Someone needs to remember what we lost, she said, and what we swore to protect. So they rode again through the breach, the one place where the wall's frost still shimmered faintly with the shape of a man's outstretched hand. Beyond lay a land reborn. The air was clean, the snow soft as silk. Streams trickled through the valleys, clear and cold. Here and there, small clusters of huts stood among the hills, built from driftwood, bone, and stone. The people who emerged from them were wildlings indeed, but they bore no weapons. Their faces were pale, their eyes strange, gray shot with faint silver. They called themselves the Bound. We remember the cold, said their leader, a woman named Arya Frosthair, when they met her. The old dead walked among us once, but the frost turned them to sleep, and a voice in the wind told us to live. So we built and waited. Tala studied her. A voice? Arya smiled faintly. It spoke through the snow, a man's voice, stern but kind. He told us the long night was ended, but that we must never wake it again. Tala felt the world shift beneath her feet. Harl. The woman tilted her head. If that is his name, then yes. The Watcher in the ice, the Master beyond. That night, they stayed among the Bound. Fires burned in hollowed stones, casting soft gold across faces that had forgotten fear. Children laughed, and somewhere, a pipe played a tune that sounded almost southern. But Tala could not sleep. She walked beyond the village, into the valley where the frost still clung to the rocks. There she knelt and pressed her palm to the earth. It was warm. Harl, she whispered, you've done it. You've given them back the world. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then the wind rose, soft and low. Tala. She froze. The voice came not from the air, but from the ground beneath her, as though the world itself had spoken. You're alive, she breathed. A part of me, enough to keep the balance. Tears stung her eyes. Do you suffer? No. I see. I listen. The north is quiet now, but it will not stay so forever. The fire stirs again in the south. What fire? But the wind faded, leaving only the sigh of the snow. When dawn came, she told no one what she'd heard. They returned to the wall within the week, carrying word of the Bound and their reborn land. The watch rejoiced, though fear lingered in their eyes. Ed listened, silent and thoughtful. If there is peace beyond the wall, he said, then perhaps we have a reason to remain, to guard that peace instead of fearing it. Tala stood before the frost once more, her hand upon its glowing face. She thought she saw his reflection there again, faint and fleeting, a ghost within the ice, smiling as though at last content. "Rest easy, Harl," she whispered. "Your watch has not ended, but neither has ours." The wind rose gently, carrying with it a whisper of snow that danced like silver dust across the wall's crown. And though none could see it, deep within the heart of the ice, a man's shadow stirred, calm, vigilant, and eternal, watching over both realms, as the master beyond the wall kept his unending vigil beneath the quiet song of ice and fire. The seasons turned, though not as they once had. Where winter had lingered for years, now it passed swiftly, giving way to a cautious spring. The air softened, the rivers thawed, and green crept once more into the bones of the north. Yet the wall still stood, tall, gleaming, and alive with a quiet light that never dimmed. No longer merely a barrier, it had become a thing of reverence. Pilgrims came from the far corners of the realm to look upon it, to touch its cold face, to whisper prayers to the man bound within. The common folk called it Snowbane's gift. Tala had grown into legend among them, though she wanted no such thing. She lived still at Castle Black, her black cloak torn and patched, her sword hung above her bed. To the brothers, she was the last ranger, a woman who had walked beyond the world of men and returned with knowledge no one else could bear. Some nights, when the wind blew from the north, she would climb the wall and stare out across the wastes. The land beyond shimmered faintly with frost, though she knew it was alive again. Hills of green beneath veils of snow, rivers that sang softly to the sea. And somewhere within that land were the bound, the descendants of those who had once hidden from death. They, too, had begun to change. It was in the 3rd year of the thaw that the first bound emissary came to Castle Black. He arrived alone, walking barefoot across the snow, untouched by cold. His eyes gleamed faint silver, his hair pale as new frost. "I am sent by the Watcher," he said when brought before the Lord Commander, "the one who stands beyond the wall." Ed Tollett had grown older, though his wit had not dulled. "We have many watchers," he replied dryly, "but only one who does not eat or sleep." The emissary smiled faintly. "You know of whom I speak. He bids you hold your ground." The balance stirs again. Tala, who stood beside the table, felt a chill settle in her bones. What balance? The emissary turned to her, and for a moment his gaze softened. "The sea sleeps, but fire wakes. In the far south, men build weapons that burn hotter than dragon flame. They seek to wake the old gods of Valyria, to claim their power. The Watcher fears what such fire might loose." Ed's brow furrowed. "Valyria's been a ruin for centuries." "Ruins still dream," said the bound softly, "and dreams can burn." He bowed once, then departed, vanishing into the snow as though he had never been. Tala stood in the courtyard long after he was gone. "It never ends," she murmured. "Always another darkness." Ed joined her. "If fire wakes, perhaps it's our turn to stand against it. He bought us peace, but not forever. No peace ever lasts in this world." She looked toward the horizon. "Then perhaps it's time I saw what lies south again." The road to Winterfell was long, but not lonely. The north had changed in ways Tala could scarcely have imagined. The people no longer feared the cold. They had made peace with it. Fields grew even in frozen soil, their crops kissed by frost, but strong. The children of the bound had begun to walk among men, pale and strange but kind, their eyes shining faintly in moonlight. When she reached Winterfell, the castle stood proud once more, its towers repaired, its godswood thick with new life. The heart tree glowed red beneath a shroud of late snow, its face weeping sap like blood. Lady Arya Stark received her in the great hall. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her presence was unbowed. "Tala Snowbane," she said, rising to meet her. "I never thought I'd see another of the watch south of the wall." Tala bowed. "My lady, I come not for the watch, but for warning. There are whispers of fire rising again in the south." Arya studied her a long moment, the hall silent save for the crackle of the hearth. "Fire," she said at last. "You mean the old fire? The dragon's fire?" "Yes, and worse. The bound say men are stirring the ashes of Valyria itself." Arya's gaze grew distant. "My brother once dreamed of rebuilding a world from its ruins. Men have short memories and long greed." She turned back to Tala. "You'll go south then?" Tala nodded. "If there's truth in these tales, the North must know what it faces. The wall keeps the cold, but who keeps the flame?" Arya's lips curved in a grim smile. "The same ones who always have, fools and the brave." She offered Tala a sword, slender, strong, and dark as a raven's wing. "Take this," Arya said. "It was forged from dragon glass and steel. My brother Jon once swore such a blade could slay both ice and fire. Perhaps you'll need it." Tala took the weapon, feeling its weight, its perfect balance. "Then I'll carry it for him, and for Harl." The journey southward was long and strange. Villages whispered her name as she passed, though few dared speak to her. The old ways had begun to stir again. Small folk left offerings of salt and bone at crossroads, and the red priests of Valhalla preached that the Lord of Light was returning to claim his dominion. In Old Town, she found the proof she feared. The citadel's highest tower glowed faintly with red light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Scholars whispered of a hidden order working beneath the city, Meisters who sought to awaken the ancient fire buried beneath Valyria's ashes. One night she crept into their halls. What she saw there made her blood run cold. Chains of molten metal, forged from stone that smoked even in darkness. Glass candles burning with flames of blood and gold. And upon a great iron table lay a map of the known world, its edges charred. At its heart, carved deep and filled with crimson wax, were words she would never forget. The Long Flame. The Masters believed they could summon it, a fire to end all frost. Tala turned to flee, but a voice stopped her. "You come from the north," it said. She spun, hand on her sword. An old man stood in the doorway, robed in crimson rather than gray, his eyes sharp as obsidian. "Who are you?" she demanded. "A student of what your friend became," the man said. Othrys was a fool, binding himself to the wall. He held death at bay, but he could not banish it. We mean to do better, to wake life eternal. By fire? By the true light of the world. Fire is purity. Fire remembers. Tala drew her blade. Fire destroys. The man smiled. And yet, without it, nothing grows. Before she could strike, the room shuddered, the candles flared, and for an instant, she saw something vast in the flames, wings of molten gold, a face of burning ash, eyes like suns. The fire spoke. The wall burns cold. The flame must rise. Tala fled into the night, her heart pounding. The stars above Old Town glimmered faintly red, as though reflecting the fire below. When she looked north, she thought she saw frost spreading across the horizon, a shimmer of light rising in silent defiance. The world stood once again between two awakenings. And in the heart of the frozen north, deep within the living ice, the master beyond the wall stirred from his dreaming. The cold around him thrummed with warning. He felt the warmth creeping into the veins of the world and knew it for what it was. Not dawn, but fire. and somewhere in the far south, the fire answered the frost. The red dawn came creeping over the reach, painting the sky with colors that did not belong there. It was not the rose of morning light, but the hue of embers, ashen, angry, alive. Farmers who rose before the sun swore they saw faces in the clouds, shapes that flared and vanished like sparks. The Meisters said it was nothing but dust and smoke from the southern storms. But the storms had not come from the sea. They had come from beneath the earth. Tala Snowbane rode north again, her cloak torn by travel, her sword wrapped in linen to hide its strange black sheen. The roads were crowded with refugees, small folk fleeing from lands that once bloomed golden beneath the sun. She passed burned fields and empty villages, the air thick with the scent of iron and ash. By the time she reached the neck, the rivers steamed at dusk, their waters warm to the touch. The trees there had begun to twist unnaturally, their trunks scorched on one side and frosted on the other. The old Crannog men she met along the water's edge refused to speak of what they had seen, but their eyes told enough. When she reached Moat Cailin, she found it garrisoned not by soldiers of the north, but by wanderers, those who sought to cross the swamps and escape the strange heat creeping upward from the south. They whispered that fire had returned to the ruins of Valyria, that the seas boiled, that dragons, or something worse, were stirring in the deep. Tala had seen such omens before, but this time it was no army of the dead that threatened them. It was the living, driven mad by their hunger for power. 2 weeks later, she stood once more before the wall. It shone with cold light beneath the pale moon, its face unmarred, serene, almost holy. And yet, as she approached, she felt a wrongness in the air, a faint vibration, as though the frost itself was uneasy. The guards at Castle Black recognized her at once. "The Lady of the Wall returns," they called. "Snowbane's friend." Lord Commander Ed Tollett came to meet her, the years having carved deeper lines into his face. His beard was streaked with white, his eyes weary but sharp. "You're back sooner than I hoped," he said. "Tell me the South isn't as bad as the Ravens claim." "It's worse," Tala answered. "The fire wakes. Valyria's ashes burn again. The Maesters have turned from study to sorcery." Ed let out a long breath. 7 bloody hells. I always knew those gray rats would get ideas. "They call it the Long Flame," Tala continued. "They mean to raise it high enough to burn the wall." At that, Ed's humor faded. "Then they've doomed us all." He led her to the wall's base, where the frost shimmered like starlight. "He's been restless," Ed said quietly. "You can feel it in the air. Some nights the wall hums like a harp string. The brothers hear him walking again." Tala laid her palm against the ice. It was cold, yes, but beneath the cold was a thrum of heat, faint but real, the same warmth she had felt in the fires of Old Town. "Harl," she whispered, "you can hear it, can't you?" The frost beneath her hand trembled. The flame rises. The voice filled her mind, vast and distant. It was not words so much as thought, like the sound of wind across the frozen plains. "Harl, tell me what to do," she murmured. "How do we stop it?" "Balance. The world must balance. If the flame burns too high, the frost must deepen. You'll freeze the world again? Not if they yield. And if they don't?" The wall darkened for an instant, and she felt something shift deep within it, a slow stirring of ancient power. Then the long night returns. She stepped back, breath catching in her throat. "No, we can't lose the light again. You swore the world would live." "The world will live," the voice replied, calm as snow, but not all within it. Ed watched her carefully. You spoke to him again, didn't you?" "Yes," she said, "and he's preparing for war." The ravens flew within days. The north readied itself once more, though none were certain what they were preparing for. Winterfell became a fortress of flame and frost. Arya Stark returned from her wandering to stand beneath the heart tree once more. The wildlings came south to aid the watch, bringing with them the bound, those pale, silent folk who owed their lives to Harl's sacrifice. From the south came darker tidings. A red star had appeared in the sky, burning each night above the ruins of Old Town. Travelers claimed the seas off the broken arm of Dorne, boiled like cauldrons, and lights danced above the waves. The Meisters who had sworn themselves to the long flame no longer hid their work. They spoke openly of a new dawn, one that would cleanse the world of its endless winter. But every dawn, Tala knew, was born of darkness. She returned to the wall one last time before the fire reached the north. There she stood alone upon the heights, the wind cold against her face. The world stretched vast below her, endless snow to the north, endless smoke to the south. "Is this what it comes to?" she whispered. "Ice and fire, forever at war?" The frost beneath her boots stirred, and a figure took shape beside her, tall, shadowed, wrapped in a cloak of rime. The war was never between ice and fire, the figure said. It was between balance and desire. Men would rather burn the world than let it be still. "Harl." He turned to her, his eyes pale silver, his voice the echo of all winters. "You must go south again, Tala, where I cannot follow." To stop them? To remind them. Of what? Of fear. Then the wind carried him away, and she was alone again. When the fires came, they came not as dragons, but as light. From the southern horizon, a wall of flame rose, tall as the wall itself, red and gold and white. It moved like a living thing, devouring forests, boiling rivers, turning night to day. The people of the north fled northward toward the one thing that might save them, the wall of living frost. At Castle Black, Tala stood with the watch. The bound gathered at her side, their pale eyes aglow. Ed turned to her. "If this doesn't work, you'll freeze us all." She smiled grimly. Better frozen than ashes. Then she raised her sword, the one Arya had given her, forged of dragon glass and steel, and struck it into the heart of the wall. The ice sang. A wave of cold burst outward, racing across the land, meeting the fire in the plains beyond. The clash was deafening, flame and frost colliding, sky and earth trembling. For a heartbeat, all the world was light. Then silence. When the haze cleared, the fire was gone. The wall still stood, gleaming white against a pale dawn. The air was cold, but gentle. The world breathed again. Tala fell to her knees. "Harl?" she whispered. The frost shimmered once, faintly. "Balance," came the whisper. "Always balance." And as the first snow of the new spring began to fall, the master beyond the wall slept once more, his vigil eternal, his peace hard won. Yet far away, beyond the ruins of Old Town, a single ember still glowed in the ash, stubborn and small. It pulsed once, like the beat of a heart. The song was not over. The ember that burned in the ruins of Old Town did not die. It clung to life as if the air itself feared to smother it. For months, it glowed unseen, buried beneath the ash of fallen towers and the bones of those who had worshipped the long flame. When at last the wind came from the east, it uncovered the ember and fed it until a new spark rose against the dawn. From that spark came whispers. The survivors of the Meister's order, those who had fled the wrath of frost, gathered in secret beneath the smoking spires of what had once been the high tower. They were fewer now, but harder. Their chains were gone, their robes burnt to cinders, their eyes lit by a feverish light. They spoke no longer of knowledge or balance, but of vengeance. "The frost has stolen the world's heart," said their leader, a man called Meron the Red. "The north freezes our blood, our dreams, our very souls. We will not bow to cold death. We will bring the dawn that never fades." And so began the cult of the unending fire. They built their altar upon the ruins, and from the shattered stones they carved a new sigil, a burning sun surrounded by a crown of broken chains. At its center, they placed the ember, still alive, now encased in crystal. It pulsed with the rhythm of a heart, faint but constant. One night, Meron knelt before it and whispered, "Great flame, the world is bound by frost. Give us your breath, and we shall unmake its master." The light brightened, and deep within the wall, the sleeping heart of Harl Snowbane stirred. Far to the north, the world had settled into uneasy peace. The winters were shorter now, the summers longer, yet the cold remained, tempered, not slain. The Bound had built small keeps along the edge of the wall, living half as men, half as myths. They tended the frost and sang the old songs that Harl had taught them in dreams. Tala had taken no rest. She served as warden of the watch, for Ed had passed quietly into the Godswood one winter's eve, his black cloak folded across his chest like a shroud. The brothers buried him beneath the wall itself, where the frost would never touch him. In the years that followed, Tala's hair grew white as snow, but her strength did not wane. Each night she walked the wall and listened for the faint hum within it, the slow heartbeat of the one who slept beyond. Sometimes she thought she heard him whisper still, "Hold fast." Those two words had become the watch's new vow. But now, as the ravens returned from the south, that vow was tested once more. "They've lit the fires again," said Bran one morning, his face pale beneath the torchlight. He had aged as well, though the years had not dulled his restless eyes. "The reports say the coast near Old Town burns day and night. No smoke, just red light in the sky." Tala took the letter from his hands. The seal was half melted, the parchment scorched at the edges. She read the words slowly. "Their leader calls himself the Flame Reborn," she said. "He claims the fire is the world's true soul, that the frost was an illusion meant to keep men in chains." Bran spat into the snow. "Chains, is it? I'd take cold over madness." Tala folded the letter carefully. "If this is true, they'll come north soon enough. Fire always seeks what it cannot have." Weeks later, the first refugees arrived, fishermen from the western shores, sailors from the Arbor, even Meisters stripped of their chains. They spoke of ships of flame, sails of smoke, and men who walked unharmed through burning cities. "They say the sea itself burns," one of them whispered. "The water catches fire where their ships pass. The Flame Reborn walks upon it like a god." That night, the sky turned red again. From the top of the wall, Tala watched the distant glow spread across the southern horizon. It looked like dawn, but dawn that never moved, never ended. She closed her eyes. "Harl," she whispered, "if you can hear me, we need you." The frost beneath her feet shuddered. A low hum rolled through the wall, deep and slow. "I hear." "Then wake," she said. "The fire's rising." "Not yet. The balance must hold." She clenched her fists. "Balance will not save us if the world burns to ash." The ice glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. "When fire touches the frost, I will rise. Then I'll bring it to you," she swore. By dawn, she was already riding south. Bran rode beside her, though his arm had long since withered from the frost's old bite. "You're certain this is wise?" he asked as they crossed the plains of Last Hearth. "No," she said. "But if Harl sleeps until the world ends, we'll have no world left to wake him into." They rode for days beneath skies that grew steadily brighter, the air growing warmer with each league. When they reached the last river, they found it half-boiled, its surface shimmering with heat. Dead fish floated belly up, their scales blackened as if kissed by fire. And then they saw it, the line where fire met frost. The land there steamed like a forge, half snow, half molten stone. The ground cracked beneath their horses' hooves, and the air shimmered red. From the distance came a sound, not thunder, not storm, but chanting. "The flame reborn," Bran murmured. They crept closer until they saw them. Hundreds of figures robed in crimson, their faces hidden behind masks of gold. At their head stood Meryn the Red, his arms raised toward the blazing sky. "The frost is a lie," he cried to the gathered host. "The world was made for light, not for cold. The long night has stolen too many years. Now we return to the first fire." And before them burned a column of flame, tall as the wall, shaped like a man. Its eyes burned white-hot, its mouth moving in silence. The ground shook with each pulse of its heat. Bran gripped Tala's arm. "Seven, save us. It's alive." Tala's gaze hardened. "Not yet." She spurred her horse forward, drawing the dragonglass blade. The fire roared at her approach, and Meryn turned, his face lit with fanatic joy. "You come from the wall," he said. "You are the servant of the false cold." "I'm the servant of balance," Tala said, "and you're about to learn what happens when you break it." She drove her sword into the ground. The steel rang like a bell, and the frost spread outward in a circle of blue light. The air screamed as flame and ice collided. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then the wall answered. A beam of silver light burst from the north, racing across the plains. It struck the column of fire, shattering it into sparks. The air turned white. When Tala opened her eyes, the cult was gone, vanished into ash and steam. Only Meryn remained, his body half frozen, half burned. He looked up at her with a smile both mad and broken. "The flame never dies," he whispered. "It only waits." Then he crumbled, scattering into dust. Tala looked north. The wall gleamed brighter than ever, its light rising like a second dawn. "Harl," she said softly, "you woke too soon." The wind answered, gentle and cold. Soon enough. The fires in the south dimmed, but did not vanish. The frost in the north deepened, but did not spread. The world hung once more in fragile balance, as it always had. Tala returned to the wall, her blade blackened, her heart weary. She pressed her hand to the ice and whispered, "Rest now, my friend." But she knew he would not, for somewhere beyond the horizon, beneath the sleeping earth, a single spark still glowed, waiting, patient, eternal, and the song of ice and fire went on. Years passed, though time meant little in the north. The wall still loomed against the sky, its face gleaming silver in moonlight and blue by day. Travelers said that, at certain hours, it sang, a deep, distant hum that rolled across the tundra like the sea. No one alive remembered the old wall, the one that had been only ice and stone. This one was different, alive, aware, and eternal. It was said that if you pressed your ear against its frozen heart, you could hear a heartbeat within, slow and strong. The people of the realm had begun to call that pulse the Song of the North. Tala heard it every day. It followed her through her dreams, a steady rhythm beneath the whisper of wind. The watch still stood under her command, though they were no longer soldiers of a dying cause. They were wardens now, keepers of a peace hard-earned, fragile as glass. The wildlings and the bound lived side by side with them, their differences fading into memory. And still, the world changed. The summer stretched long, and the air grew soft. Ravens flew farther each year, bringing word from lands once thought lost to fire. The flames that had risen in the south had dimmed, leaving behind only ruin and silence. But fire, Tala had learned, never truly dies. It began with a single raven from the citadel. The bird arrived at dusk, its feathers scorched at the tips, its message sealed in wax the color of blood. Bran brought it to her chambers himself, his face drawn. "You should read this," he said quietly. The parchment was old and brittle, but the words were written in a steady, practiced hand. To the Lady of the Wall it read, "The fire sleeps again, but the ground burns beneath our feet. The long flame has not perished, it coils deep within the earth, gathering breath. Our dreams are filled with light that blinds and voices that command. The flame reborn will rise once more, and when it does, the frost will break from within. We beg you, listen to the wall. It knows what comes." Signed, Archmeister Olivar of Old Town. Tala set the letter down slowly. "He speaks of tremors?" Bran nodded. "Reports from White Harbor say the sea boils at low tide, and in the west, the mines of Lannisport collapsed in smoke. The Meisters claim it's the same fire returning." "The world has forgotten what Harl did for them," she said softly. "They think the wall will protect them forever." Bran's voice was heavy. "Maybe they're right. Maybe that's what he meant it to do." "No," she said. "The wall was never meant to hold the world captive. It was meant to remind it." That night, she climbed the wall once more. The wind bit at her cloak, the stars sharp as blades above. The frost glowed faintly beneath her boots, casting her in pale light. She stood there for a long time, staring southward where a red shimmer pulsed faintly on the horizon. "Harl," she whispered, "they're waking it again." The wall trembled beneath her touch. Frost cracked, and for an instant she thought she saw his reflection in the ice, his face calm, his eyes silver as moonlight. "I know." "Then rise. Stop them before it begins." "I cannot." "Why not?" "The balance holds still. If I rise too soon, I break it. Then what are we to do?" For a long moment, the only sound was the wind sighing across the plains. Then faintly came his answer. "You must go where I cannot. Find the fire before it wakes. There are still hearts willing to listen." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "And if there aren't, then you must remind them." The frost dimmed again, leaving her in silence. By dawn, she was gone. Bran watched her depart, the black banner of the watch fluttering behind her horse. He had seen too many leave the wall, but none who had returned unchanged. "She'll find him again," he said quietly, to himself, to the frost, to whatever still listened. "She always does." The wind did not answer. The road south was long and lonely. Where once there had been ruin, there was now rebirth, though a strange one. Trees with red-veined leaves grew along the rivers. Fields of dark grain shimmered faintly under the moon. The people she met along the way were strong, but wary, their faces touched by both fire and frost. In White Harbor, she found the docks filled with smoke. The sea steamed against the piers, and fishermen spoke of strange lights in the depths. "The ocean's heart is burning," one old man told her. "You can see it glow some nights, down there under the waves, like a lantern sunk in darkness." From there, she took ship across the Bight. The winds were foul, the water too warm. At night, the sea glowed faintly red as though reflecting the sky. In Old Town, the high tower stood again, but not as before. Its stones were blackened, its peak crowned by a light that flickered and pulsed. As she approached, the air thickened with heat. The streets were nearly empty, the windows shuttered. Those few who remained spoke of dreams filled with flame and whispers of the second dawn. Tala walked through the gates unchallenged. Inside the high tower, she found the walls lined with glass candles, hundreds of them, burning not with ordinary fire, but with blood-red flame. The air hummed with power, thick enough to taste. And at the center of the hall stood a figure she had seen before, though not in flesh, Meryn the Red, or what was left of him. His form shimmered like heat rising from sand, half man, half light. His eyes were hollow, burning with endless fire. "Snowbane's handmaid returns," he said, his voice a whisper and a roar all at once. "You came to see what cannot die." Tala drew her blade. "You should have died with your flame." "Death is Frost's illusion," he said, smiling faintly. "Fire remembers. Fire waits. We do not seek to burn the world, Lady of the Wall. We seek to wake it. You call this waking? You're tearing the heart out of it." "Perhaps the heart needs tearing." He raised his hand, and the flames of the candles flared higher, filling the hall with red light. "Your wall binds the world in sleep. My flame will make it dream again." Tala stepped forward, her sword gleaming black in the fire's reflection. "Then let us see whose dream endures." They clashed, not steel against flesh, but frost against flame. Her blade hissed as it met his burning form, and the world seemed to shatter around them. The air screamed, the floor split, and the tower shook to its bones. For a moment, she thought she saw something behind him, vast and golden, wings of fire unfolding across the sky. And then, from far away, a great wind rose. The wall had awakened. A beam of pale light shot across the horizon, striking the high tower's peak. The flames guttered, turned white, then vanished. When Tala opened her eyes, she stood alone among ashes. The air was cold again. The red candles were gone, their holders rimed with frost. She sank to her knees, exhausted. "Harl?" The wind answered softly. Balance restored. She closed her eyes, letting the silence settle. But deep beneath the earth, in the heart of the world, something vast stirred. A heartbeat that was not Harl's. It was older, slower, neither fire nor frost, but something between. The world exhaled once, and the sea shuddered. The wall sang louder that night than it had in a century. And somewhere in the song's depths, a new note joined it. Neither light nor dark, but both at once. The age of ice and fire was ending, and another had begun. The wall sang through the night, its deep voice rising over the north like a prayer. All who lived within sight of it woke from their sleep and listened. Men, women, and children alike, hearts thrumming to the rhythm of that endless hum. Some wept, some prayed, and others simply stood in silence, knowing they were hearing something older than the world itself. Tala heard it too, though she was far to the south. She lay beneath the broken arch of the high tower, her sword clutched across her chest, frost gathering around her like a shroud. The flames had died hours ago, leaving only the soft light of dawn spilling through the cracks in the stone. The city was quiet now. The red glow that had haunted Old Town skies for months had faded, replaced by a pale stillness that felt both holy and dreadful. Tala rose unsteadily. Her hair was streaked with ash. Her cloak burned at the edges, but her eyes, gray and cold as the wall itself, were steady. Around her, the halls were filled with frozen shapes, shadows of men who had reached for the flame and been caught between moments. Their faces were peaceful, almost serene. "Harl," she murmured, her breath clouding in the chill air. "You've done it again." The wind that drifted through the shattered windows seemed to sigh in answer. "Not I," it whispered faintly. "The world chooses its own balance." She touched the frost on the nearest wall. It pulsed faintly beneath her palm, alive with quiet power. It was not the cold of death. It was the stillness before rebirth. Outside, the harbor steamed like a cauldron. The water was warm, but the air above it shimmered with frost, turning the mist into a veil of diamonds. Ships lay half-buried in ice, their masts glistening like spears. Tala stepped into the street. The people who had survived the fire came out of their homes and watched her pass. None spoke. They only bowed their heads, some in reverence, others in fear. The world had changed again, and they could feel it in their bones. By the time she reached the northern road, the frost had spread as far as the eye could see. But it was not the harsh, killing frost of the long night. It glittered like morning dew, thin and clean, soft beneath her boots. Flowers bloomed within it, tiny, white, and radiant. The air smelled of snow and salt and something else, hope. She followed the road north for weeks. Along the way, she met others who had felt the wall's song, shepherds from the Vale, hunters from the riverlands, sailors from the western shores. They spoke of dreams that had driven them from their beds, dreams of a great tree made of ice and flame, its roots winding through the world's heart. They followed her without question, as if drawn by something unseen. Tala said little. She could feel Harl's presence in every gust of wind, every shiver of the frost. When at last they reached the neck, the mists parted before them like curtains. The bogs had frozen solid, and beneath their glassy surface glimmered strange lights, faint as candle flames. Cranogmen stood on the ice, their faces painted in pale blues and whites. "The wall calls," said one of them, bowing low. "The master stirs." Tala nodded. "Then we'll answer." The journey northward felt timeless. The sky remained pale and cold, the sun a white blur in the heavens. Days bled into nights, nights into dawn. When at last the wall appeared, rising like a mountain of glass, the travelers fell silent. It gleamed brighter than ever before. The air around it thrummed with energy, each breath crackling with unseen light. Bran awaited her at Castle Black. His beard had grown thick and silver, his eyes sharp as the first frost. "You've come home," he said. "For now," she answered. "What did you see in the south?" She paused. "The fire has fallen silent, but it sleeps, not dies. The world isn't meant for one or the other. It's meant for both." He nodded slowly. "And Harl?" She glanced toward the wall. "He's waking." The ground trembled faintly beneath them. The frost along the wall's base rippled, spreading outward like waves across a frozen sea. The others who had followed her, farmers, hunters, children, fell to their knees. A sound rose from deep within the ice, low and resonant. Then slowly, the frost began to shift, taking shape. A figure emerged, not from the surface, but from the heart of the wall itself. He was not the Harl Snowbane she remembered. The man who stepped forth was something greater and stranger, his body woven of light and frost, his eyes bright as the first dawn after the long night. "Master," Bran whispered. Tala stepped forward. "Harl," she said softly. He looked at her, and for an instant the cold melted from his gaze. "You kept your oath," he said. His voice was both thunder and whisper, echoing across the frozen plain. "You held the balance." Tala bowed her head. "And you kept the world alive." Harl looked north, where the horizon shimmered faintly with pale light. "Not alive, awaking. The fire has learned restraint, and the frost has learned mercy. Now the world must learn both." Bran frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Harl said, "that I cannot hold the wall forever. It was never meant to stand eternal. It was meant to teach." The crowd murmured in fear. Tala stepped closer. "And when it falls?" Harl smiled faintly. "Then the world will no longer need it." He raised his hand, and light flowed from his fingers, spreading across the wall in rippling patterns. The ice glowed brighter, softer. Cracks spread through its surface. Not fractures, but veins of living light. One by one, the brothers of the Watch knelt. "Rise," Harl said. "Your watch is ended. You have guarded the living long enough. Now, guard the peace." The light grew, flooding the sky until it swallowed the sun. For a moment, all was brilliance and song, the harmony of ice and fire at last in accord. When the glow faded, the wall still stood, but smaller, softer, no longer a barrier, but a bridge. Its face was clear, and through it one could see both north and south as though they were one land. Harl was gone. Only his voice remained, echoing faintly in the wind. "The world is yours again. Keep its balance well." Tala looked to the sky, where the light lingered like a veil. "Goodbye, my friend," she whispered. In the years that followed, the wall became a place of pilgrimage. The north and south met there as equals, their borders blurred. The bound walked openly among men, their pale eyes bright with quiet wonder. Tala lived to see the world heal. She grew old beside the frost, her hair white as snow, her heart full of peace. And when she died, they buried her at the foot of the wall, beneath the soft hum of its song. They say that on winter nights, when the auroras dance and the frost glows faintly blue, two voices can be heard singing together, one of ice, one of fire, bound in harmony. And thus the world endured, balanced upon the edge of both death and life, guided by the memory of a ranger who became a god, and a woman who refused to let his story end. The long night was over, and at last, so too was the watch. The age that followed the breaking of the wall was one of quiet wonder. The realm of men, long sundered by fear, found itself united not by war, but by awe. The frost no longer killed, nor did the fire consume. Instead, they mingled like breath and blood, tempering each other into something new. The rivers ran clear, the winters came and went in their season, and the fields of the north grew green for the first time in living memory. Yet even peace casts shadows. Tala Snowbane had been gone 10 years when the first whispers began, rumors carried by sailors and merchants from far shores. They spoke of lights deep beneath the sea, of fire flickering in the abyss. Some said it was merely the world's new warmth awakening the old deeps. Others swore they saw shapes within the glow, vast and slow, like sleeping gods turning in their dreams. In Winterfell's hall, men still told tales of Harl the Master beyond the wall, and of Tala, his last ranger. The children grew up reciting her deeds, and the maesters recorded them as history, though few could agree where the line between truth and legend had fallen. Bran, now Lord Commander in name only, had withdrawn to the rebuilt Castle Black, where the frost sang softly through the stones. His hair was white, his voice thin as mist, but his mind was sharp as the edge of winter. He alone claimed to still hear the wall speak. He would stand before it each dawn, leaning upon his staff, and whisper, "You still watch, don't you, old friend?" Sometimes, when the light was right, the frost would ripple beneath his hand in answer. Far to the south, in the citadel's lower halls, a young acolyte uncovered a forgotten text, a fragment burned and half-frozen, bound with melted rings of metal. Its words were written in ink black as soot. "When the frost grows kind, beware the flame that learns patience." The Meisters argued over its meaning. Some dismissed it as superstition. Others saw it as prophecy. A few, the boldest, said it was warning. One among them, a woman named Myera, could not forget it. She had been a child when the world nearly burned, and her dreams were still filled with the light of that fire. So she studied in secret, learning of the old magic, the bindings that had held the wall, the blood and memory that had shaped it. And as she read, she began to notice strange things. The sea had grown restless. The stars shifted ever so slightly each night, and beneath the city of Old Town, the earth was warm again. In the north, the Bound had begun to change. They still lived close to the wall, their villages built of pale stone and glassy frost. But where once they had been silent and gentle, they now seemed distant, their eyes too bright, their skin faintly glowing under moonlight. They spoke in strange riddles, claiming to dream of deep places and endless halls of light beneath the ice. When Bran sent envoys to ask what troubled them, they said only this: "The Watcher is silent. The sea calls again." The message reached Winterfell in spring, and there it found Alice Karstark, Warden of the North, who ruled in quiet strength. She had been born the year the wall changed, and she had never known a world without its hum. Yet when she stepped outside that night, she heard nothing. The wall was quiet, too quiet. 3 nights later, the dreams began. Across the north, people woke screaming, their minds filled with visions of fire and frost entwined, of a vast sea turning black, of a song sung backward and broken. The Bound fell into trances, murmuring in a tongue none could name. The Maesters burned candles until dawn, poring over every ancient text, searching for meaning. And in the farthest north, the aurora that had danced blue and green across the sky turned red. Bran stood at the wall again, the cold stinging his skin. "Harl," he whispered, voice trembling. "Is this you?" But there was no hum, no ripple, no breath of wind, only silence. Then, faintly, the ice beneath his hand grew warm. A sound like a sigh rolled through the frozen plain, and the surface of the wall darkened, not with shadow, but with depth. For the first time in years, Bran felt fear. From within the ice, something moved. It was not Harl. The light that stirred there was darker, heavier, burning not blue or white, but deep, molten red. It pulsed once, twice, like the slow beating of a heart. And then it spoke. "He sleeps, but we remember." Bran staggered back. "Who are you?" "The balance breaks. One Bound cannot hold 2 fires. You will see the dawn that does not end." The wall shuddered. Frost cracked and ran like veins of blood. The hum returned, but it was discordant now, sharp and harsh. Bran turned and fled. In Winterfell, the sky bled with light. The stars dimmed, drowned by the shimmer of red and silver that rippled across the heavens. Alice summoned the Maesters and the Wildlings alike. Together, they looked north, where the horizon glowed as if the sun were rising from beneath the world. From the east came Maera, the acolyte now grown to archmeister, her eyes lined with sleepless years. She carried with her the burned fragment, and a truth none wished to hear. "The flame beneath the sea has woken," she said. "It is not like the fire that came before. It is colder, slower, alive. It waits beneath the frost, where Harl once bound the dead." Alice's hands trembled. "Then he failed." Maera shook her head. "No. He gave us time, but nothing made of magic lasts forever. Not even peace. What do we do?" The Archmaester looked northward. "We listen. The wall will tell us when to stand." That night, Bran stood one final time before the wall. He pressed his palm to its trembling surface. "If you can hear me," he whispered, "wake. We need you again." The answer came not as a voice, but as a feeling, vast and deep, the ache of the world remembering itself. "Not yet. But the fire rises. Let it. When it meets the cold again, I will be there." Bran nodded once. He understood then what Tala had always known, that balance was not the end of struggle, but its beginning. He turned away, walking into the dawn as the light of the wall flared once more, half white, half red. Far beneath the frozen sea, unseen by any living soul, an ancient door stirred. Its surface was carved with runes older than men, older than the first men, older than gods. For 8,000 years it had slept in silence, sealed by both frost and flame. Now, cracks spidered across it, glowing faintly with light. From beyond came the sound of waves, and within them a whisper. The world remembers. The world dreams. And above, the wall sang on, its song no longer one of peace, but of promise and warning. For even in balance, the song of ice and fire was never meant to end. The night of the red aurora was remembered for generations. The night the sky itself seemed to burn and freeze at once. Across the north, beasts hid in their dens and birds fell silent. The rivers stilled, the forests shivered, and from the frozen sea there came a sound like a deep, slow heartbeat echoing through the world's bones. At Castle Black, the wall glowed crimson and white. The air was thick with the scent of frost and smoke. Bran stood at the highest tower, wrapped in furs, his eyes reflecting the shifting light. Below, the brothers of the Watch knelt in the snow, their faces pale with awe. "The wall is bleeding," one whispered. "No," said another, voice trembling. "It's alive." Bran said nothing. He could feel it, the pulse beneath his boots, the weight of something vast stirring in the deep. For 100 years, the wall had been silent, dreaming in its cold eternity. Now it sang again, but its song was no longer the soft hum of balance. It was the cry of awakening, and it was not Harl's voice. Far to the south, Archmeister Maera stood upon the citadel's battlements and watched the same red light creep across the heavens. Her chain glimmered faintly in the glow, each link reflecting both fire and frost. She had read the signs, the prophecies, the omens. All said the same thing. The old order was breaking. Below her, Old Town was still. The harbor steamed faintly, a strange heat rising from the sea. Maera turned to her apprentice. "Fetch the glass candle," she said. The girl obeyed, bringing forth a candle of black glass, its surface smooth as a mirror. When Maera lit it, the flame that rose was neither gold nor red, but silver blue, cold and steady. She closed her eyes and reached through the fire. For a heartbeat, she saw nothing. Then the world shifted. She stood upon a field of endless snow, beneath a sky split by two lights, one white, one red, and before her stood a figure cloaked in shadow. "Harl Snowbane," she said softly. The figure's eyes glowed faintly, silver as moonlight. You seek balance again, he said, but the world must unmake itself before it can be whole. The sea stirs, she said. The fire beneath it wakes. Can it be stopped? Harl's expression did not change. It is not meant to be stopped, only tempered. The fire rises to cleanse as the frost rose to preserve. The world's song demands both verses. Then all this peace, this harmony, it was never to last. Nothing lasting ever grows, he said. Only cycles. Ice and fire, sleep and waking. That is the song. That is life. Myra reached toward him. And you? Will you rise again? If I must. But I am no longer the wall that stands between worlds. I am only its memory. The vision dimmed. The flame went out. When she opened her eyes, dawn was breaking over Old Town. The sea was glowing faintly red. North of the wall, in the lands once thought dead, the bound had gathered. They stood in the snow-swept valleys, their pale faces turned toward the horizon. Their leader, a tall man whose eyes shone with inner light, raised his hands to the sky. It begins again, he said. The sea calls. The fire remembers. His voice carried through the wind, reaching the scattered tribes, the remnants of wildlings and watchmen who had made their homes beneath the aurora's glow. In their dreams, they saw a great door beneath the ocean, its carvings glowing red and white. They saw it open, and from within poured light, not the light of flame, nor the shimmer of ice, but both woven together. Some wept in terror, others knelt. In Winterfell, Alice Karstark stood in the godswood. The heart tree was blooming, its pale leaves edged with frost, its red sap thick as wine. The air smelled of both snow and smoke. She knelt before it and whispered, "Old gods, tell me what this means." The tree did not answer, but its branches creaked softly, and the face carved into its bark seemed to smile. When she rose, she saw Bran's raven waiting upon the stone wall, its feathers rimed with ice. Tied to its leg was a strip of parchment bearing 3 words. The song begins. That night, Bran climbed the wall one last time. The wind tore at his cloak, and the cold bit deep into his bones, but he did not falter. He reached the crest and looked out across the world, the north stretching endless and still, the south shrouded in red light, the seas gleaming faintly with fire beneath their ice. He lifted his staff and struck it once upon the frozen surface. "Wake then," he said to the wind. "Wake, and let the world choose its fate." The wall answered with a sound like thunder. Cracks raced across its face, glowing with light. From the fissures rose mist, white and red, swirling together in great spirals. Then came the song. It was not human nor wholly divine. It was the sound of the world breathing, the voice of earth and sea, of flame and frost entwined. Every creature, every tree, every stone felt it in their bones. It was both a beginning and an ending, a promise and a warning. And from deep beneath the ocean, the door opened. Light poured upward, turning the waves into glass. The fire beneath met the frost above, and for an instant, all was still. The sky went white. When the brilliance faded, the wall no longer stood. In its place stretched a great plain of crystal and snow, gleaming under the pale sun. The world was whole again, north and south joined, no longer divided by death or dread. Bran stood at its heart, his staff broken in 2. Around him, the frost glittered faintly, pulsing with a slow heartbeat. "Harl," he whispered, "you were right. It never ends." A voice came on the wind, softer than snow. Nor should it. The song is not meant to finish, only to change its tune. Bran smiled faintly. "Then sing, my friend. Let the world hear it." And the wind rose, carrying the song far and wide, over the forests of the north, over the green fields of the south, across the thawing seas. It filled every heart, a melody both sorrowful and serene, the sound of life itself renewing. Children born under that dawn would grow to call it the era of the mending. They would not remember the wall, nor the wars that came before. They would know only the tale of the two who gave their lives for balance, the ranger and the master, the flame and the frost. And when the northern lights shone red and silver together, they would whisper the old names in reverence. Tala Snowbane, Harl, the master beyond the wall. Then they would fall silent and listen, for in that light, faint and eternal, the world still sang the song of ice